This will serve as the TFT for creation control, process focused art. It's a 2-hour face-to-face training. There are a lot of materials that we need to set up this class, but it's really fun, hands-on, engaging class that people so far seem to like. There is a list, or there'll be a list on SharePoint of the materials that you would need to do the class. And then basically what you're going to do is you're going to set the room up in different stations, different types of art stations, and then we do some different things with those stations during the training. I typically do like the group seating where I put a couple tables together where you've got 5 to 6 people at a group, and then each of those groups basically are have a station of materials that are housed there. They don't have to stay at that station when we do the activities, but just it needs to be set up at the beginning of the class or we won't have time. So one station is a painting station, so you're going to have different materials so that people can paint, different types of paper, different types of paint, different instruments that they can use, brushes, toothbrushes, utensils, all different kinds of stuff to paint. One's like a collage and assembly station with different materials. One's a drawing station, and then one is clay or Play-Doh. We do have materials at the office that you can come get to do this training. Okay, so we start off the class, of course, by going over all the housekeeping stuff. Let's see why my slide won't change here. There we go. And then we present the objectives of the class. So in this class, we're going to actually let them experience the difference between a process-oriented art opportunity and a product-oriented art opportunity, and help them understand and discuss the benefits and restrictions of providing each type of activity for children. We're going to let them brainstorm new ways to conduct what we kind of call old school experiences in art, so that children can have opportunities for creativity and control over their experiences. And that's why we kind of call this creation control, because we definitely want them to have control of what they're doing. If it's a literacy activity or a science activity or a math activity that just happens to use art materials, then we want to encourage them to put that down on their lesson plan as such. We want them to connect that to those standards of the GELS as such. We want them to, quote, sell that or bill that as that science activity that happens to be using art materials. If it's a true art opportunity, we want 99% of those to be those activities that they have control over and they've got freedom of expression. And then the last objective is we're going to help them learn how to observe children during art experiences so that they can support their creativity and development, and use those observations to offer supporting language and interaction that can happen while children are using those materials. So the first thing we do is we get to let them have a chance. We tell them they're going to have a chance to experience 2 different types of art scenarios in the class. So in this first one, you're going to give everybody a set of verbal instructions on how to complete a specific art activity, and then you're going to show them an example. You can use anything you want. Sometimes I will actually bring a coloring sheet that I have colored, or an actual picture maybe torn out of a calendar that's really pretty, and then we're asking them that today this is what we're going to make. And so in this one you may have to move around some drawing materials. One time I literally gave everybody the same colored pencil and then told them this is what we were going to make, and it was like a dolphin or something. You can kind of do whatever you want. But the point is that they're not given control over what they're going to make or what they're going to use to make it. You're dictating the subject and the medium for them. So you give them a few minutes to make the product, whatever you decided you're going to have them do, and you're going to walk around the room continually giving everybody further direction, correcting their, quote, mistakes that are observed, stopping people from trying to use different materials that might be on their table or do something other than what you specifically explained. One time I asked people to make fish, and someone started making the seaweed and the kelp and the shells and everything in the ocean. So stopping them from doing anything besides following those, quote, instructions. And not that we're going to be mean about it, but we're going to pretend to be a little upset at the quality of work being produced. You know, people are coloring outside the lines, or someone makes a purple cat, and you're like, really? Is there such a thing as a purple cat? And keep bringing it back to the fact that their creations need to look like your example. If you are like me and that's really hard to do, even to fake it, you may know somebody in your class, or you could ask for a volunteer that might be better at doing that than you are. But it definitely needs to be the experience where they get those negative feelings out of it, so that they can see the difference between that and the second experience they're going to have. So after they're finished, we debrief the scenario and we lead a large group discussion about the experience and the feelings that are tied to those experiences. We want to reiterate, of course, that we have the power to lead children to specific feelings based on how we conduct the art experiences. So we want to keep bringing it back to how is it that we want to make the children feel, and are we doing that through the way we are facilitating art experiences? Obviously, most people are going to say they felt stifled. People usually say, well, I'm not even interested in what you asked me to do, so why would I want to do that? Just anything they say, we're going to make sure that they remember that this is what our children are feeling when we are directing their art experiences. Another good point to bring up is that developmental level. Sometimes we're asking them to create things that they can't even do yet. And so how does that make a child feel if they can't do that? Or even just from that simple standpoint, if they can't make their picture look like yours because you have better fine motor control and 40 years more practice. So how is that going to make them feel when their picture doesn't look as good as yours or the person sitting next to them? And then after the end, we're going to explain to them that we are going to talk about and experience a different way of art, offering the art experiences that are going to lead the children to more positive feelings. Then we're going to let them get up and participate in a block party regarding some discussion questions just about kind of art experiences and the teacher's role in these art experiences in general. So I will put the instructions for a block party with the resources, but basically you're just going to put on some music and have the teachers walk around for a minute or so. When you cut off the music, they're going to get into small groups. I usually try to keep these really small, 2 or 3 people, so that everybody has time to talk. When they stop and group up, then we'll ask the first question. We'll give them a few minutes to discuss their answers, and then we start the music again, and they move on to the next set of groups. So when the music stops again, we're going to ask them to pick a different group. These questions do not have right or wrong answers. So this is not something that after they do the discussion, we ask them to report out. If you wanted to ask for one answer, you might be able to do that. But typically what happens is if we start listening to the 13 different groups that were formed and all of their answers, we lose a lot of other time for the other material and the activities in the class. And the point is for them to be talking about this. We want them to discuss it with each other. So the first block party question is, why do children enjoy using art materials? What do children gain from exploring and experimenting with these art materials? And of course, we want to bring this up because we don't want to lose the reason why we're letting them use art materials in the first place. And a lot of times if we conduct art experiences like that first scenario they just participated in, we end up not letting them enjoy anything. We don't let them gain from exploring and experimenting if we're conducting them the way the first scenario was conducted. So this is kind of a reminder. Second question is, how do you think it's important to encourage and value creativity in children? And how can this be done by teachers? So again, not a right or wrong answer, just letting them discuss it on their own. And then the third one is, why do you think some teachers have a hard time choosing process-oriented art experiences over those focused on product? And this is a good question for them to start thinking about the whys, because maybe they've never thought about it before. Maybe they can actually identify the reason or the barrier that's not letting them do this, and then they can find ways to overcome that barrier. Maybe somebody admits, wow, you know what, I didn't realize I was really hindering the children, and it's really more about how I don't know how I'm going to clean up the mess that's going to happen. And from there, once you identify that barrier, then you can start doing some strategic planning. Well, I'm going to offer a few materials at a time, but really teach them how to use it so we can avoid some of the mess. I'm going to purchase some plastic tablecloths to put all under the entire area that I'm afraid of, so that cleanup is easier. I'm going to look at my schedule and add 10 more minutes in to ensure we have the cleanup time, so that I'm allowing that mess to happen in the first place. But we never get to the fixing part if we don't actually kind of think about what's stopping us. So let them go through those questions, and then we're going to move on to some specific information. And this is just in a minor lecture format, but a lot of these are on the screen. So if you want to involve your participants, obviously you could do some Red Robin or just pop-up reading if you want to ask for volunteers to read what's on these next few slides, and then we can, further the discussion and reiterate some of the points. So the first one's about some best practice notes to remember throughout all of this, including we always want to allow for individual expression and free choice. So we want to let them choose both the subject and the art medium, which is the material that their instruments that they're using, whenever possible. The ideal goal is that they are choosing both of those things. If we can't let them choose both of those things, maybe they get to choose the what when we're telling them what they're going to use, or maybe they get to choose what they're going to create and we give them some materials. One's better than none, both is better than one. So just whenever possible, we want to strive to do that. And we just want to make sure, again, that very few activities require following an example. You can ask them for some ideas about mediums that you've let them use before, so they can share some of their ideas. Offer different categories of materials, including drawing, paints, collage, sculpture, and craft materials. So once you get those volunteers of what they've used, you'll be able to point out that they can fit in these different categories. And of course, we want to make sure that we offer that variety. The better opportunities they have to be more creative if we give them more variety of materials. And then giving them opportunities to learn new and complex skills through project requiring several days to complete. And then some examples are pottery, weaving, embroidery, etc. So anything that lets them focus a little more on the planning. There's a little more planning involved in these projects, and then they have to carry them through, and they may have to come back to them, gives them a chance to do some troubleshooting, change directions, alter what they're doing, and or really be having to be persistent if they're following a specific pattern or something. Then we go through the importance of creativity. So people who are creative look for more than one way to do something, solving problems, and they can think of many options. And obviously this is going to reiterate into different parts of their life other than just art. Creative people exhibit qualities such as spontaneity, originality, a willingness to take risks, being flexible, and having a sense of adventure. And creative people feel secure in their opinions and ideas. And obviously we definitely want to help support this in each and every child, because it's not just their art opinions and their art ideas that we want them to feel secure and confident in. This is another one that's really going to go to a lot of different areas in their life. And so we want to support that. And this is just an easy, fun area that we can do that in. You can ask the participants for other areas where the creativity can be important for children, either now or in the future, just to help them solidify that this is definitely transferable. Then we talk some specifics about what is learned in the art area. We do break this down into different developmental areas. You can ask for examples from participants first if you want, or you could go through these and then ask for additional examples. So social emotional development, expressing feelings such as selecting bright colors to match playful moods. So we got some creative expression going on here. Feeling pride in their accomplishments, helping them express their individuality by producing pictures that represent inner ideas but don't necessarily look like something. So these are our abstract pictures where, of course, we as the teachers are, asking them to tell us about their pictures and what they made. Sharing, cooperating, and collaborating with others typically comes up during their art experiences, because there's not always the same amount of materials as there are children, especially when it comes to colors. They talk about their ideas with each other sometimes. They've got to, of course, figure out what they're going to do. They might ask other people, how can I make this? So it's a very social, can be a very social situation. And then making choices and trying out new ideas. When it comes to cognitive development, obviously we've got our creativity and combining materials and textures. So they're going to be doing a lot of describing and just looking and recognizing what's happening when they do combine materials, even if it's just adding water to the watercolors, seeing those colors mix with each other, feeling the different textures of different types of paint, different types of paper, different types of instruments that they're using. They can start making a lot of comparisons and contrasting how things are different and what different effects it has on their art experiences. They're going to experiment with cause and effect, again, with mixing two colors to produce another color. They can solve problems, how to get a mobile to balance, or how to fit many pictures of an object on one page. If they're collaging, sometimes they have to, practice place those pictures 5, 6 different times and rearrange them to get them to all fit before they put some glue on there. They'll be helping develop planning, observation, and comparison skills, looking at concepts such as size, shape, color, location, symmetry, balance, and design. They learn to create patterns and designs, which goes into that math skill. And then communication of ideas. And this is not always just their communication of their planning ideas, but their communication of things that they're thinking about, things that they're thinking, this is why I think this happened, or this is what I think is going to happen, or even communicating those patterns and designs that they're recognizing and that they are creating themselves. And then physical development, using their small muscle skills or their fine motor skills, refining hand-eye coordination, and they're learning about directionality. They're painting a circle with one continuous brush stroke. So again, you can do a little recap of this. You can ask people for different ideas that you didn't mention here. Or you can even just throw out a question about, were any of these new to you that you hadn't thought of before? So now they get to do an old school activity. How can we do it better? So we do this in a small group setting, and this is to help them improve their current practices. So we get them into groups of 3 or 4, and they receive cards with typical, what we would call typical or old school art and craft activities. And each group receives different cards. So one might have a description of making that traditional turkey, where someone gets 5 different feathers that they cut out from a piece of paper, not actual feathers. They're all the same color. They get that turkey body. They're making that typical paper turkey. There's another one about making a Valentine for mom or dad, and you're literally just cutting out a heart, and you're all, just coloring the same thing on it, I think. So what we want to do is we want to ask them to brainstorm ways to improve those activities, and keeping in mind that we want to provide that creation control for the children, and keeping in mind that we want them to really pick both the subject and or the medium. So we're going to ask them to look at the cards that they have, come up with a different way to do that, kind of keeping the same goal of the activity in mind, but a different way to do that gives the children much more control. We're going to choose a spokesperson from each group to share out at least one idea that they had. If we have time, we can solicit additional ideas from the larger group. And then we want to bring them back to their handout. Their handout has a transfer of learning activity on there, as they get to pick one of the ideas that they're going to actually try out within the next month in their class. And stop this for a second to show you the handout. So here's the notes page that they're going to get. And there's a few things that they can just kind of follow along and jot down. We want to reiterate that we know they're doing certain things well, so there's a spot for them to just mention something that we talk about during the training that they're already doing well, some areas that they could improve on, little plan, a place to circle terms or concepts that we talked about, just to kind of reiterate that in their mind. And then this top right corner is that one new school activity that they're going to pledge to try within the next month. Okay. So now they get to go back to their second scenario. So these are our process-oriented art stations. So it's going to be much different than the scenario they participated in at first. So this is where we're going to use those group tables that are already set up in those stations: the painting, collage assembly, drawing, and clay and Play-Doh. So participants are going to get to choose which station that they want to explore at, but we want to ask them to just stay in one station. Then we're going to ask one participant at each station if they wouldn't mind taking on the role of the teacher. And you give them either chart paper or a piece of paper, and we're going to ask those teachers to record comments they hear from the rest of the group while they're playing with the materials. Ask them to offer positive comments, complimenting their work, complimenting the creations, and asking them open-ended questions about their processes and creations during the activity. So they're going to have literally, if we're on time, about 15 minutes to just be involved with that station, create themselves whatever they want, and let that interaction happen between the teachers, the people playing the role of the teachers, and then the people who are involved in the materials. So then again, we are going to debrief this just like we did the first one. So we're going to lead that large group discussion about, you know, their feelings and what they felt, being allowed to produce their creations this way as opposed to that first scenario. And then definitely tie that back to their feelings, their support, how they felt because of the teacher interaction and those differences. And then again, we're going to remind them that these are the feelings that we want to help create in the children. We want to talk about the specific comments heard that the teachers may have heard the people make while they were creating, any questions that were asked by the person doing the role of the teacher, and any comments offered from the teacher to the children. And then we're going to ask them what they liked about each of the activities they selected, maybe get some insight on why certain people choose the clay and Play-Doh as opposed to the painting station. We always have someone who says, I just didn't want to get messy, so I just chose the drawing materials. It's not as messy as paint. It helps us to remember that everybody does have different preferences, and we want to support those in children. We're going to ask them what discoveries they made in exploring with the materials, and then tying that back to what could children learn from those materials that we gave them in this day. We do encourage people to take pictures of what's on the table in case they don't have those typical materials in their program, and give them some idea of how to just support the children better by picking up some different and variety of materials. So now everybody can go back to their own seats, and we're going to talk a little bit about what to observe for during art experiences. They do get a handout that list these. So we want to make sure that people know there are specific things we can watch for and observe while children are playing with art, to have a purposeful observation, which can help, you know, let us know what level children are at, what's exciting or maybe not as exciting and engaging for the children, help us determine what we could offer next or what we could do to challenge children in the future if we're doing these purposeful observations. So we're going to look obviously at what materials children typically select for their art experiences, how they use the materials, and their actual actions in exploring materials. So what is it that they specifically do with these materials once they choose them? Whether children work alone or with others, how long they remain at a task, what fine motor skills they've developed, whether they're ready for more challenging art experiences, any problems that they encountered and solved during their art creation, and then in general, their discoveries. And then we're going to point out that if we're observing for these things, then the supportive comments that we can make, the open-ended questions that we can ask, and then just those individual interactions, we can have those occur much more frequently and with ease because we're more educated about what they're doing. And again, they're going to get an activity, a handout that lists these so that they can take home. Okay, so then our final activity, we let them get into small groups, and we're going to let them try to brainstorm additional open-ended questions for the specific art stations that were used in this training. So they can form their groups, and then we kind of let them just rotate through each station, about 3 minutes at each station. They can use, we encourage them to take the handout that we just gave them on what to observe for, encourage them to use that during the activity to help possibly guide their open-ended questions that they might ask. And then after the time's up, we're going to ask for, depending on how much time is left, you know, ask for so many specific questions that maybe people came up with at each station. So they have their own handouts. They'll be able to record other questions that other people say if they want to take them back. So that's their second transfer of learning activity. Then finally, we're going to take final questions and review the objectives from the beginning to make sure that we covered all of these. I usually cover these as a question. You know, did we experience a difference between these different types of art opportunities and understand some of the benefits and restrictions of each? Did we get to brainstorm some new ways to conduct some old school experiences so that children have more opportunity for creativity and control? And did we learn how to observe children during art experiences for better support of their creativity and development, and to help use those observations to support more language and interactions? So then we let them go back to their handouts and finish their handout, all the different little boxes on the handouts. And then we do have a final handout. It's a poem called The Little Boy by Helen Buckley. And this is just for them to take home. If you happen to have time to read it, you can, or if people want to take turns reading paragraphs or something. I have found it online. I've been able to pull it up and have someone read it. Just it's like a video format where somebody's reading it. And you may not have time to do any of this, but we like to put this in their hands. This is a poem about, just basically about a little boy who has different types of art experiences offered to him at different schools, and how it really, what we do with children and how we conduct these art experiences can really condition children as to how they look at things. So it's a pretty impressive poem. It kind of sticks with some people. So if you have time to read it, I suggest try to do that. But at minimum, read it yourself, know what it's about, and just kind of give a little synopsis and summary to everybody so that we can really encourage them to read it when they take it. And that's the TFT for Creation Control Process Focused Art. Thank you.